is the Pegasus Podcast, presented by Night Sports Now. UCF news, views, and a few hot takes. Now, here are your hosts, Bailey Go Knights Adams and Christian Charge On Simmons.
Welcome into episode 265. Be sure you're following us on Twitter at BaileyJAdams22, at @ByCASimmons, at Night Sports Now, and at Pegasus Podcast. You can also email us at PegasusPodcast@ksn@gmail.com. Christian, how's it going?
Going well. Going great. Yeah. You know what's funny is this is one of those episodes where I forgot you were going to ask me that, so just didn't really have an answer ready. I, in my head, was like, he'll talk, and then we'll start talking about the podcast, and forgot that, we usually say hello very briefly off the top. So, it's episode 2. What is this, 270?
265.
Very close. And I still don't know how our podcast works.
Oh, no.
I got some admonishment from my dad because my dad listens to the podcast every week, and he told me about how he enjoyed the segment of last week's episode where I just wholly dropped out of the podcast for the final 10 minutes because I was reading about the Chom news and was just not there. And that probably wasn't professional podcasting, but in my defense, it's not every podcast you find out about a bunch of shady assistant coach stuff involving your team in the background. So I feel like I'm going to give myself a half a pass for it.
Yeah, that's true. Are we going to talk about that or no?
I don't know. It kind of feels like it's already – I was about to say it's already old news. He committed to Cincinnati like 4 hours ago. But I feel like we can just say it now because it's been reported in a couple places. If you are one of the few who still never found out what happened, or maybe you just live a normal, balanced life and didn't feel like digging to find out, the whole behind the scenes that was reported by Brandon Hellwig originally, and I think Stephen Laird followed up, and I think Matt Michelle wrote something, is that he, Mustafa Chiam, and UCF's assistant coach, who was a big part of why he came here initially, did some sort of shady stuff where they were kind of shopping themselves around as a package deal behind the scenes. It was even suggested that the coach had told Chiam to go easy in the crown and not risk injury, and that Cincinnati was bringing both of them in and offering the coach a multi-million-dollar package and Chiam a multi-million-dollar package as well. Matt Michelle reported today that that's $2 million going to Chiam to bring him in. So yeah, kind of a weird, shady, not great way to get a player. But you know what? I personally am, and I mean this from the bottom of my heart, I wish Chiam the best. I honestly don't hold, like I said, I would betray my family for $2 million. I don't care. But I that set Bailey off. But
now your dad's going to admonish you for that this week.
That's what I'm going to admonish for this week. But I, for one, am very excited for when Cincinnati spends $2 million for one player and still finds a way to not make the tournament next season, because we know it's coming. They have not made it since 2019. They haven't won a game since UCF, who does not care about basketball. Basketball exists as a wispy phantom of a concept in the UCF athletics budget. UCF has won a tournament game more recently than Cincinnati. Cincinnati, who cares deeply about this? It's like football and basketball are even things. Like, their biggest rival is Xavier, who, if you're here for football, you don't even know what that is. You're wondering if that's a guy, if that's a school. I mean, and they have no success. It's really cute.
Well, we can remember when we were in Cincinnati going into that game, both football teams sucked, and everyone was like, Cincinnati fans were seeing our UCF stuff, and they're like, at least we got basketball coming up. And they were just already moving on to basketball in the first weekend in November. And I mean, I guess basketball starts a week later, but we were just like, that doesn't mean anything to us. And then UCF ended up being better than Cincinnati last year, I think, but maybe not. Was it last year? Were they better last year?
In which sport?
Basketball.
They were never really better than Cincy in basketball.
No,
but it's fine. Because
they beat them when it counted.
I think one of my favorite things about, because I'm glad this happened. I'm glad that Chiam left UCF via scandal, because UCF and Cincinnati is a rivalry that's lost its heat over the last couple of years because both are just bad at most things. So there's not a lot of heat. Got reignited a little bit today. Saw some familiar faces in my mentions, those bad, awful people saying their awful nonsense. And it was just kind of nice to be back. So I'm hopeful that maybe it reminded me that I feel like Cincinnati has hit the point now where it's not a USF level rivalry, obviously, but it's the kind of rivalry where we might occasionally leave each other alone because we've got bigger fish to fry, trying to not lose all our football games. But whenever we're both got something going on, it will turn back on quickly, I feel like, is where that's at, which is a nice place to be in.
I hope nobody ever refers to our podcast as bad, awful people talking about their awful nonsense.
That wouldn't even be in the top 10 of things people have said about this podcast on Twitter or on YouTube. But
true. No, I'm sad. Let's do the podcast.
Now I'm sad. Let's do the podcast.
Well, we got to. Today's podcast, talking a little bit about Scott Frost's comments and thoughts on NIL and the transfer portal, because he kind of talked about it a lot in his post-spring practice availability on, was that Saturday?
Yep.
It feels like it was more than that, like more than 2 days ago, but
it
was on Saturday.
Let me tell you right now, went to that access, and I dealt with this at the open practice too. There is so much freaking construction around the stadium right now that like, it's weird to be in areas that like I know because I've been around them for 10 years and I can't figure out where the hell to go because there's construction everywhere. Like it was in the field house. I was struggling for how to get into the field house, and the answer was walking up a hill. So we got it done.
Interesting. And then after that, we'll talk about kind of just our final thoughts on spring ball, because spring practice is over. And it did kind of feel like it was anticlimactic without a spring game. It just kind of ended.
I agree.
And it was just kind of like, okay, well, it's over. No more practices, and we'll see y'all in a few months.
Everyone go home.
But yeah, let's start with Scott Frost talking about NIL, the current kind of landscape of college football and college athletics. He was asked initially about the whole Tennessee situation with Nico and all that went down there, and he was like, I'm not touching that. I don't talk about other programs, and didn't want to get into specifics there, but can read some of his quotes here. Do you want to just stop me when you want to say something? And because I was just going to read the quotes. These are from Brandon Hellwig on Twitter.
Yeah, I don't know.
No? Okay.
Well, I feel like it's a lot for you to just read, but I also kind of just want it all out there, and then we can talk about it because I don't necessarily have a line by line. But you go ahead and you read what you think is best.
Well, okay. Well, now I'm going to have to skim it. I need you to talk, and I'm just skimming. We'll see what I want to read.
Shout out to Brandon Hellwig, by the way, for transcribing all of this, because I've been there and then Bailey listened to it, and I thought we'd just talk, and then Brandon posted the whole transcript. And I was like, well, great. Now we can say the words. And so Go ahead, Bailey. Take it away.
So he said, I think just in general, there's people in life and some of these players' ears that don't always have the best interest in mind. And you have a tendency in life to think grass is always greener somewhere else, and usually it's not. When you're 18, 19, 20 years old and you think money is everything, and it's not. Happiness and success are way more important than that. And I've learned that personally. I'm happy here and happy to be back here.
Let me stop you really quickly.
Yes.
And then I want you to keep going. But just I would love to be in the room when a player sits down and goes, Iowa State's offering me $250K, and Frost replies, happiness and success are a lot more important than that $250,000. I feel like it's not going to go up. But anyway, go ahead.
Sometimes decisions are made for the wrong reasons, but that's life. Hopefully we can try to educate guys too as much as we can and mentor them as much as we can to help them make good decisions. He was asked if he's dealt with NIL demands. He said, yes. I don't think anybody's really happy with the situation we're in now, except maybe the institutions that have just unlimited money to spend and they want to keep that advantage. If people really knew what went on, it's a mess. It's constant negotiation, and it's a bidding war for every single player, whether they're in the portal or not. That's the reality, whether people want to admit it or not. It's a sad state if a sport as beautiful as college football is won by the people with the richest boosters. That's kind of where we are right now. I'll pause there and kind of say that's kind of where we've always been.
I literally was going to say that comment you were done, is the richest teams dominating college football is kind of what's always happened. But
that's the one part of all of this from Frost that I was kind of like, okay, well, like that's just that's the case now, and it's always been the case. Always probably will be the case.
What's extra funny is that, sorry, really quickly, just to say, is that while NIL is and the portal, I care less about NIL being regulated than I do. I think the portal regulation is the bigger thing, because financial differences wouldn't be as big of a deal if you had players that were locked into a contract. It's the whole, there's 11,000 players and they're all free agents every day. That makes it difficult. But the funny thing about that comment is NIL has, by any metric, made more teams competitive. Like, there are programs that were not competitive before who have become competitive via NIL, be that Texas Tech, they think, this season, or Tennessee or BYU, a lot of these money programs that weren't quite like, blue bloods or whatever. I'm sure Tennessee fans, if they're listening, for some reason would get mad. I just said they're not a blue blood, but you know what I mean? It's funny. It's actually kind of been the opposite effect, but if you're poor like UCF, it kind of sucks.
Yeah, and this is just the last little bit here, was hopefully they're trying to put some guardrails around it, and I think it would make the game a better game if there was at least some restrictions and rules in place, which is kind of what you just alluded to. And I think that's really, it seems so simple, and I know it's harder to probably litigate and figure it all out on paper and get everybody to agree on it. But just from an outsider's perspective, or at least from a fan's perspective, that seems so obviously what you need to do is I don't want, as a coach or as just an athletic program in general, having your players, like you said, be free agents every single day. How is that sustainable? I just don't, it's insane.
And I can't overstate, before we get directly into Frost's comments, how much the NCAA fully and completely did this to themselves. There were many points over the last 15 years where there were off ramps where they could have fixed this and they chose to not do it. And now we're in a situation where players can take basically any case before a court and they're going to look at this and correctly say, hey, none of this model is legal. Like the whole NCAA cartel joke is like, it did operate as a cartel. It was not legal really anything they did. So it all just gets shot down. And instead of doing this proactively and creating a system, they let it just wither into oblivion. And now there is no system and it's just nonsense. And rev share is coming. Presumably there's a hearing this week. And honestly, I think it'll make things better, but we've seen how this works. We've thought they fixed it 5 different times and there's always the workarounds. And I think the obvious one for rev share is the whole market value NIL deals. So there's a clearinghouse that's going to kill NIL deals that are pay for play and not market value. And I don't know how you can legally decide what market value is. It's a capitalist economy. Market value is exactly what people say it is. So I just assume the first time that the clearinghouse, guy pays a player, Tennessee booster pays a player $5 million to tweet one time, they're going to say that's not market value, killing it. They'll go to a judge and the judge is going to go, well, if they think that's market value, then it's market value. So I don't know, whatever. I digress. The point is, like, regulation is, it might get a little better, but it's not here. But I thought the Frost comments were really, really interesting and really telling in a few ways. I mean, it's pretty telling for where UCF is at, which I don't think should come as new information to anyone listening to this podcast, that UCF is not at the top of the food chain in NIL. I don't believe they're at the top of the food chain or close to it really even in their own conference. We're seeing that time and time again too. But one thing that really stood out to me was I was surprised by the openness in a way. And I was also surprised by it in part because of how different it was from Gus's messaging on this, because this is obviously something Gus was asked about repeatedly in his 4 years here. And it was very different answers. It was always, well, this is the model. This is college football. So you got to roll with it and you got to thrive in it. And my question for you, Bailey, because I'm curious about this, is I think there are two paths you could go here. And I think I know where I lean. But you could look at the Frost comments 2 ways. You can look at them as, I don't know if you want your coach publicly saying, I don't like this system and we're not going to do well in this system. That's one way to look at it. And that could be a turnoff. You could look at it the other way as, are fans going to maybe have more realistic expectations or have a little less animosity toward the school when players leave because there's more openness about the challenges they're facing than there was under the previous administration?
Unfortunately, like everything, it's probably something in the middle of those. It's probably like
crazy how that works.
Probably right in the middle. But I don't know. Hearing all of this, I found it like, I guess this kind of makes me lean toward the second option, is I found it kind of endearing. Yeah. Because it was relatable. Like, because he was saying that and I was like, it was just like, I was there like also going, yep, I agree. Like it was, yeah, I think with Gus, and I think that's part of it, is we had 4 years of Gus saying nothing and 4 years of Gus just taking the absolute most mundane route possible to answer these questions. And Frost was like, listen, like, if you want me to be honest, no one likes it. And he said, other than all of the big money programs, which is the truth. Yeah. Because I'm sure, I mean, I don't know if he's having these conversations frequently with other coaches and stuff, but if you're in this position, like, it has to be frustrating to know, like, okay, not only do I have to like put a game plan together and just figure out how to coach these guys, and like he just got here still only like 5 months ago, learning as players, learning and trying to get them to buy into the system, get them to buy into the culture, while also still having to kind of manage and meet with players every day pretty much to make sure they're not going to leave. You also just said something important. You said, and you went right into it there. You said learning his players. He's learning his players and he doesn't even know if they're going to be here. Yeah. When fall comes around. And that, okay, that's another thing that college football is actually going to fix, is apparently as early as next season, maybe 2 seasons from now, they're going to move to a model where instead of 2 portal windows, there will be 1. There will no longer be spring ball. There will just be dead time. They'll do winter workouts and whatever as they do now. And then instead there will be, this April window will be the first portal window. There won't be one after the season ends. All the players will move. Then there will be some sort of summer camp in place of what used to be spring camp. And then everything else will work normally. So at least you won't get, because it's this frame of time that's insane. It's the December to May time frame where the season ends, a bunch of players hit the portal, teams do bowls and conference championships. I don't know why I said them in that order. That's not the order they happen. They do conference championships and bowls. They do the playoff. Coaching changes happen. Then they do spring ball. Then all the players move again. It's so strange that it works that way. And it just it's like, I forget which coach said it. It wasn't a UCF coach this week. They were on some national thing and they talked about how crazy it is that they're like
have to give so many reps in spring to guys who aren't going to be here. Like, it's just such a waste of everyone's time to do that, both the player and the coach. And so that will get better at least. But part of Frost's comments, and he said some other stuff later in the press conference about this too, talking about the portal and how I think he called it a nightmare. He was just talking about how difficult it is to deal with. And that was the only alarm bells thing for me. And this is a little separate from NIL, but what you said about how he just wants to coach, he said that multiple times during the press conference. He goes, I was just happy when we got to spring ball and I could just go back to being a coach. And this is the same issue I had when we talked about how he's going to run the offense this season. Is I don't know if he realizes yet that when fall comes around, he's not going to get to just be a coach like he was in spring ball. He's not going to be, I mean, he's going to be able to do that a little bit, but it's really going to be more the other thing, the stuff he talks about hating so much. It's kind of like, I know, and I'm not saying like there are not really any head coaches in FBS football right now who are like, hell yeah, can't wait to deal with all this crap. But I do worry a little bit if that's going to, what's already a season of transition, if there's going to be some growing pains as he learns that, you know, he really can't just shut out all the noise and coach football this fall. He's going to have to be dealing with all this stuff in overdrive compared to what it is now.
Something, actually, I'm kind of now curious if this is going to take us in this direction of the conversation. I don't think I've ever really talked about it with you, even off the podcast, but what your thoughts are on some programs, because it's not happening everywhere, but some programs actually hiring GMs. Yeah. And a lot of times it's, or like just even personnel people, and to kind of handle that side of it. Like, would that be something, especially when you've got a coach like Frost who clearly hates it? He obviously has to still work with that personnel guy or GM, whatever you want to call him, but to kind of take some of that off of him, the day-to-day of like, let me manage this roster and make sure 2 or 3 of my running backs aren't going to just hit the portal because they feel like it.
Yeah. And to be totally clear, UCF hired multiple player personnel and roster management folks from other schools this offseason to come in and fill some of that role. It's not the GM coach split. And I don't know. It's still new in college football, right? Like, there aren't a lot of teams operating that way, but I think that there's merit to it in part just because has there ever been a time in college football where there are more differences between being a coordinator and being a head coach? Like, that's the typical route, right? A head coach, you're typically a coordinator. You do a good job. It's so weird that we're in the space now where you do a good job. You're then hired for a role that doesn't really have anything to do with the job you're doing good at. I mean, it's totally different. And yeah, coordinators have to recruit and spend a lot of time on this stuff. That's always been the case, but it's like they still are mostly on the football side of things, whereas the head coach is sort of in these last few years transitioned into more of like a program CEO, and it's more the big picture type stuff. It's like those skill sets don't always vibe, but I don't know. I don't think you're ever like college football is never going to be the NFL. It's never going to be. There's a GM and a coach with very different, clearly defined roles. Like it was so weird to see the headline that Andrew Luck fired Stanford's coach, not the AD. Yeah, and I don't think that will ever become the norm in college football. But I don't know. It just depends on if there's ever more regulation. But I don't know. For UCF's perspective, you want Frost to run the offense, right? Because that's what he's good at. That's how UCF had success the first time, is he was a very creative play caller. I think one thing that stood out the most, and I can't speak as much to his time in Nebraska, obviously, because I'm not a Nebraska fan and I was hate watching for the first couple of years there, but he was, even in 2016, he was so good about, like, if there was a player with talent or athleticism or whatever on the roster, he would find a way to get them out there and use them, whatever it looked like. I always think about, like, I always go back to like Otis Anderson, right? Who had this amazing true freshman season, and then Heupel just like couldn't figure out what to do with him. And there were so many examples of that under Frost, where just in 2 years, so many different guys got involved on offense because they were so good at, you have a skill set, they will design something that takes advantage of that skill set and puts the defense on their heels. And like, so you want that from him, but it's not going to change that Scott Frost, there's going to come a day, I'm telling you right now, there's going to come a day this fall where Scott Frost is in the film room and he's talking with his coaches and he's trying to game plan for, I don't know, like the Baylor game or whatever. And he's getting a knock on the door, a text, and a player wants to talk about his contract, and he's having to run out for that. And then he's heading back, and now there's a booster who he needs to talk to try to get money for the player's contract. And then that player's backup hears that he's got a raise, and now that player wants a raise because why is he making so much less? And it's just that's what happens. And then suddenly you get back in the room, that's the whole rest of your day, and it's like 11 p.m. at night, and you didn't game plan. Like that's how this stuff happens for coaches now.
This is why you called it a disaster, because my reaction just now was to say, yeah, that's a disaster. And you wish there was something in place where it's like, okay, here's your contract or whatever. Here's what you're being paid this season. Don't come to me in the middle of the season and say, I want more money. Like we do a renegotiation thing. That's after the season. Focus on playing football because you're here to play football. Like, shut up. That's what I want to say, but you can't. You got to be more. You got to use a little more tact than that.
Our players like, I want another 20,000. Coach goes, shut up. I'm sure that would go. Really
shut up. Just play. We've already done the contract thing. We've already done the money thing. We'll figure it out after the season. It's
but the issue is just anecdotally. That's not a UCF thing. That's happening everywhere, and it is every week. It is literally player who hasn't been playing a ton gets out there and catches a bunch of passes, has like 100+ receiving yards. He's in your office like that. And I'm not gonna get super anti-player here because again, like get your money. It's take advantage of the system in front of you. It's not that they're doing something wrong. Now I do think there are situations. I think it's worth talking about what Frost referenced of. There are a lot of players who probably aren't doing the best things for themselves. And unfortunately, we've seen time and time again, both in UCF sphere, stories of that and without UCF sphere of seems like sometimes parents, don't necessarily understand the market they're in and think their son is worth something they're not. But it's just as a coach, I don't know. Like I worry that Frost is going to be a little caught flat-footed when he gets to fall and realizes he isn't just going to be able to sit there and coach. It's going to be mostly that than the actual coaching.
I know he said that, but he has to know.
Well, yeah, because people are telling him. It's not like they're like, let's surprise him and see what he thinks when we get there. But and that's where I might see the value of a GM, and maybe they will set something up like this. Maybe whether that be Mahajer or the player personnel folks or whatever of like, do you just set a thing with your play? Blake Bortles.
do the Stanford thing and just bring in an old quarterback, bring Blake Bortles in to be the GM.
If you had to, really quick tangent, because I don't want to forget my point, but if you had to hire like former UCF athlete has to become the general manager of UCF today, who are you picking?
I don't know. I don't know. I'll get back to you hopefully.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. Come to mind. There's like no obvious answer, which I don't know. But I don't know what you would base that off of. I wouldn't have, like even Stanford, I wouldn't have looked at that and been like, yeah, that makes sense. Like, I don't know.
I don't know. Andrew, and everybody's always talked forever about how Andrew Luck was like the smartest guy ever and was like a unique personality and that like he almost is kind of a robot. And I don't know. That kind of makes sense. That everyone thought he was going to be a coach.
The funniest answer is like Dante Culpepper. Like,
yeah,
invisible from the program for decades, and they're just like, "Do you want to like run the thing? Like, just see how it goes." But I don't know. Blake Bortles would be a fun one, but
I think he would hate it immediately. I think he'd be awful at it, but
maybe there's such a thing as do you just run interference somehow? Like, do you have a team meeting at some point in fall and be like, "Hey, like we know that all of you were going to yell about your contract at some point. When you do that, that is a Mahajer conversation." Or that is a player personnel conversation. Don't take that to the coaches. We're in season. We're trying to win games. That's what we're focused on. You take that there. And then at least those folks can run some interference and sort of hear the complaints and try to talk to players. Then there can be like, at the end of the day, Frost gets clued on and here's where we're at. This guy wants this. We're working on the money, whatever. And then Frost still needs to do the legwork of like call out the boosters and being like, please help us be less poor. But I don't know, maybe as much of it off his plate as you can. So he can. I love how we're just having like. Surely these are conversations happening. You see, for months, and just on the podcast, we're like, have they thought about like? I don't know.
It sucks. Like like you said, like I am for the players getting their money and take advantage of this system as it is, but there's no denying the system is incredibly flawed. And I actually almost want to say there's not actually a system. I don't even know if you can call it that. Like it doesn't even qualify as a system, and I think it's unsurprisingly, we've talked about this before, getting tiring or tiresome for the fans.
Yeah.
And I'm not immune to that either. You and I have had conversations where it's like the sport is just, it's not fun right now. I'm not enjoying this.
It's a weird situation to be like, you're in a model that is not sustainable, but it might never change. Because what fixes
by definition, then it's sustainable, but it's like
it has to be. What fixes this? And apologies if I said this on last week's podcast, but everyone knows in the space that what fixes this is if it is just put in writing that they are employees. You drop the amateur thing and you agree to a collective bargaining agreement. That's where you get set contracts. If that were to happen, there could be a world where you will see headlines one day. One, a lot of this would be probably more above board. Like we'd probably know what UCF's NIL budget is and we'd know what Texas's is and things like that. But you could see a world where, hey, UCF, you'll see a headline. UCF has signed Taven Jackson out of the portal to, I'm making up numbers. These are not real numbers, dear God, but a 2-year, $450,000 deal with a $200,000 buyout. And that's the deal. And it's not Taven Jackson gets here and he's a free agent the next day. He's not a free agent in 10 years. He's got a 2-year deal. And maybe that's his eligibility. Maybe it's not. And then sure, there can still be a situation where maybe the portal window comes around And Florida, for some reason, is like, we actually love Taven Jackson, so we're going to pay UCF his $200,000 buyout to buy out his contract, and we'll take him in. And you'll see stuff like that. But none of that can really happen until there's a CBA. And what's funny is there have been articles now about how schools are trying to do that. They're writing buyout language into contracts now, into rev share contracts that are coming up. And what they're running into is players are just ignoring the contracts. Like, they'll sign a contract and the player just leaves anyway. And they just kind of shrug their hands because they're like, well, we can go to court and the court will side with the player. So it doesn't matter. Like, the contracts don't mean anything. So it's just.
I'm glad you did kind of answer a question I was going to ask about that. Is like, if there's a buyout, you can only exercise the buyout during the portal window. Because like, then if you get to the point where there's buyout that you can just buy out at any time, a lot of schools are just like,
there would still be windows, which, by the way, I'm amazed that a court hasn't killed the windows yet. Like, that's like the one thing they haven't taken down. And all it takes is one player in November who's like, I don't want to be here. But I don't know. I just.
Even if you're me and the player says, I don't want to be here, it's just shut up. That's it. There's your answer.
You'd be a great coach.
Yeah.
It is just kind of a hellish time to be a head football coach, but luckily they all make millions of dollars, so they can put up with it. But I do want to really quickly, something you said, because I've been thinking about this, because we talked about, like, we have to be right in is it the first percentile or the 99th percentile? I never know how that works. 99th?
99th, I think.
We're the upper tier of college football fans, right? I feel like you and I live and breathe this more than the vast majority of human beings.
It's 5:45 on a Monday afternoon or evening on April 21st, and we're doing a podcast talking about NIL portal and the future of college football.
This is true. I also, yesterday, with no context, just texted you 4 more months, which, is like great.
It actually made me feel, I was like, okay, that's not too bad.
It's not, I thought the same thing. I was like, it's not bad. We'll get the new video game in a couple months. It'll be great. But we're up in that. Like, I live for fall. And it's not, I love UCF with all my heart. Obviously, it's why I'm here. Go Knots. I was going to point my hat, but it's a Stitch Knots hat right now. But I love all the college football. You catch me watching some action on a Tuesday night. Like, I love all of it. And we're feeling it. Like, it's just exasperating after a while. But the thing that I wonder about, and maybe we'll be able to tell a little bit this fall if things go well, is like, are we feeling it because it's terrible, or are we feeling it because UCF's not having success in this era? Like, surely Ohio State fans are not groaning at the constant player movement, right?
That's probably part of it. I thought you were going to say, is it because we do the podcast? Because, like, some of this stuff, like, if I could just turn my brain off to some of this stuff, it might be a little easier to be a fan right now, but I can't. But yeah, no, I mean, I'm sure Ohio State's I feel like a bad example because they just won the national championship. So
well, that was the point I was making. Like, they're having you win a national championship, you're not, and you see a player hit the portal, you're not going to be like, God, I'm so sick of this. You're going to be like, hell yeah, we won the national championship.
Yeah, I don't know that they're grumbling about anything this offseason, but I guess maybe losing to Michigan. But
I think what scares me, we can't let them forget that, by the way. I say that like we're supposed to hold Ohio State fans accountable, but I find that very funny that they still haven't beaten Michigan since, 2019? Is that what it is now? I think
it was. I did that. I was writing up, this is a stupid tangent I'm about to go on, but I was writing up our edge rusher previews for the draft the other day, and I was writing about Jack Sawyer, the edge rusher from Ohio State. And I was like, he was an Ohio kid. He ended up being an Ohio State captain, and I was like, he went on to have like a dream senior season outside of losing to Michigan in November. I said something like outside of like a slip up in November, but they went and won the national championship. But I felt like it was like necessary, because it couldn't just be like, Ohio State, this dream season. If you have a dream season as Ohio State, that has to include beating Michigan.
Not beating Michigan, who they did not beat, and who also won a national championship the year before. I will never forget. I swear to God, we're going to stop talking about Ohio State, Michigan on this UCF podcast. But I will never forget, The Athletic did this whole thing because Ari Wasserman, who was at The Athletic at the time, was like originally an Ohio State beat writer, and he claimed that Ohio State fans would rather beat Michigan than win the national title.
Yes.
And all the other Athletic people were like, that's crazy. So they ran this poll, and it was like overwhelmingly Ohio State fans were like, no, like beat Michigan first, like national championship later. Like, that's the priority. And that is so insane. Like, if you I could lock in right now,
they didn't have to be mutually exclusive. Like,
if you could lock in, I know my answer, and you tell me. But let's say that UCF and USF are going to rekindle the war on I-4. It's back, and 3 years in a row, USF is going to beat UCF 3 years in a row, but UCF wins 3 straight national titles. Would you not immediately lock that in?
I would begrudgingly. Like, it's not as like cut and dry to me as like, I don't know, that the thought of that makes me cringe, and I hate it.
But the national championship is the ultimate trump card. Like, it would suck, but they'd be like,
I don't know if it is.
Like, we have a trophy. Like, it would just, I don't know.
I don't know. Because like I don't know. I don't really know the definition of a trump card, I guess, because like you would say, oh, we have the trophy, and they would be like, yeah, but we still beat you. Like the head-to-head always feels like whoever can pull that.
From an outside perspective, like who have you talked or heard about more this offseason, Ohio State or Michigan?
I guess Ohio State, yeah.
Well, then you guess, yeah. It was actually Michigan because Mikey Keene's there and fighting for the job. So I've actually been reading a lot of.
Bryce Underwood is there. LA stolen from LSU. So
I was so mad because did you see the Bryce Underwood? I don't know what we're doing. We got to get back on topic.
No, this is what's the beauty of this podcast is. You told me earlier, you were like, I set no parameters on this. We'll just kind of talk and ramble. We'll get into some weird. I want to find the message because you're like. People seem to like when we do that, and
I didn't mean like ramble into Michigan. I just meant like about UCF.
We're stretching the limits of it, but
yeah, I will not go down. I will not go down. We're not gonna get. Bryce Underwood had a highlight that went viral, and everyone was like, "Wow, he's gonna be the guy." And it was a reverse flea flicker that he underthrew to an open guy, and I was like, "This is not impressive." Mikey Keene could do that in his sleep, but whatever. I digress.
I thought you were gonna, I was telling you the direction I thought you were going to go in. I thought you were talking about that picture that like went viral of him with his jersey kind of like pulled up, and everyone was like, "Uh-oh, he's fat."
Oh, well,
did you not see that?
No, but I'm happy about that though. Good, Mikey Keene gonna win the job. I cannot. The narratives for me personally of Mikey Keene, I don't even care if he gets replaced during the season because I'm sure he will, but just like the narrative of him starting a game for Michigan after the crap that half of this fan base put me through is like, I think I'll be more excited than his parents. Like I will be like that level of joyful over that happening.
Oh gosh. Where do we go from here?
I was going to say, bring it all back to UCF. The other point about NIL when I talk about having anxiety with it, and I don't know if this is where the fan base is at, but it's at least personally where I'm at, is when UCF in 2020, right? UCF started the season. We thought they were going to like go back to the year 6 or something. It was COVID, so we knew stuff was going to be weird, but they got up to as high as number 11. Then they lose to Tulsa. They drop games. It was 6-4. It wasn't good. Gus comes in. There wasn't panic at any point for me because we knew what UCF was. We'd seen them in an era, even where they went 0-12 in the middle. We'd seen them in an era from 2007 basically to on, where they never go more than a couple years without having a really good season. They'd understood how to recruit Florida. They knew how to get guys in who, if they're 20 pounds heavier, 3 inches taller, they're going to the SEC, but they're not. So they're playing for UCF, and they could always put together really good seasons. I mean, literally, you look at that stretch. It was like conference championship in 2007. Another conference championship in 2010, including their first ever bowl win, their first ever ranked season. They play for the conference title in 2012. They win 10 games. They're a top 10 team in 2013. They win a Fiesta Bowl, another conference title in 2014. Bailey's got the Fiesta Bowl shirt. That was very random. 2014, 0-12. Whoops. Undefeated, 2017, 13-0.
Okay.
What happened?
There was a misspeak there, but I shouldn't even call attention to it. You said 2014, 0-12, but 2014, they actually won another conference championship.
Yeah, I did. Sorry, 2014 championship, 2015 0-12, 2017. Like the point I'm trying to make, you know this if you're listening to this, is just for literally 15 years they were really good, and it was because college football hadn't changed a ton in that time. There was conference realignment, but the way the game worked and was structured didn't really change, and we knew what UCF was. We're a few years into NIL, and it changes every year, but we're really like 3 seasons tops into this pure form of it. And UCF's in a new conference where everything's a lot tougher. And for the first time in their history, since they were very, very young, they're out-resourced by most of the teams they're playing in a given year. And I think what a lot of the anxiety comes from for me, and when you see even comments like that from Frost, is just I knew what UCF was. So when they had a bad season, I wasn't brokenhearted over it because I knew they'd bounce back. We don't know what UCF is in this era in this conference. We want to believe that they can win incredible things and be a brand and be nationally relevant, and I think they can, but we don't know. And it's like with every passing year they don't do that, it just raises the stress of, do we even know if they can, you know?
I think so. I was actually going to say something in response to that was going to transition us directly into spring ball talk, unless do you have anything else on this?
Go ahead.
Okay, because I was going to say in response to that, like you said, like we would know even if they had a down year, you would go into the next year thinking like, okay, like they'll bounce back this year. Like because they did that for a while where they'd have a bad year and then the next year they were fine. And I don't know when the next time is that they're going to have a good season. Right. Like it feels like it's been forever since they have had one. Because I mean, even the good quote unquote good seasons they've had most recently were frustrating and didn't even really reach the heights of the previously quote unquote good or great seasons. I don't know when that's going to come back around.
I'm not saying this is fair or correct, but without a doubt, the last season that the fan base was unanimously happy with the results of was 2018. That's the most recent time. I'm not saying that's fair, but that is the truth.
Yeah, and for me, it was 2019. Like 2019 was the last time I would say that was a season where I felt like good season. We had 2021. What?
I'd say 2021 for me because of
we had 21 where we
situation was so insane. I just couldn't believe they won 90 games and beat the Gators. But
we did reach the end of that season, and we were like, for what it was, like this season ended up being better than we thought it was going to be. But going into that year, obviously, and you can't control the injuries and all that. But I was thinking back to 2019 being like, they went into the season and accomplished not everything I thought they could or should accomplish, but top 25, all that, whatever. I don't know when the next time is they'll get to that level of.
Wait, could it be this season? Because you talk about fan base, like if the team makes a bowl, the fan base is happy, right?
Oh yeah, I'm not talking about bowl eligibility. Like if they go 6-6 or 7-5 this year, I'm happy. I want them to do that.
Yeah,
but I'm thinking next time they're going to win 9 games. Like I can't. You can always feel pretty comfortable that it would happen within the next few years, dating back to before this little era that we're in now. Now it's like it might. Are they ever going to get back to 9 wins? We don't know.
Basically, from 2007 on, with a couple interruptions, I could expect that basically every year. Didn't happen every year, but I could go into each season being like, yeah, they could win the conference this year. Literally from 2007 on. And yeah, I agree because I think, and it's. I don't know. I'm in a unique spot too, because a lot of people who are UCF fans grew up a fan of a different program and then became a UCF fan. So they might understand better that like, this is all I've ever known. So like, I'll ask you because, you've been around. Does every fan base crave the national attention the way the UCF fan base does? Because that's a huge part of the deal for UCF fans. It's not just what you did. It's like, did other people note that you were doing it? Like, were you on ESPN? Did people care? That's a huge part of the equation for the UCF fan base.
Yeah, it is. And I don't know if you're asking me this question as someone who also grew up rooting for LSU, because like LSU obviously doesn't care about that because
they're in no matter what. Yeah,
they're on ESPN every week anyway, whatever. Like
that's not something they'd ever have to think about. If they're having a bad season, it's news. If they're having a good season, it's news. It doesn't matter.
Yeah. So I think it is. It's inherent in UCF's identity to be like that. And I think, obviously, what did it though? Was it 2017 and then 2018 being left out of the playoff? Because like even before then, was there the same level of? There probably was some inherent like, oh, we want to be recognized and noticed. Obviously, you remember the Sports Center highlights of Kevin Smith and stuff, and they were saying like, sorry, we weren't paying attention to you. But it almost felt like, oh, it's like back then it was like, oh, it'd be cool if we got we got this recognition. I feel like 2017 and 2018 made it to the point where it's like, we're going to fight you if you don't recognize us.
I'm not going to say who they are because I don't want to out another media member's take because I don't know if it was a take for public consumption, but someone has held firm that they believe the UCF fan base size doubled after 2017. Like from 2017 to like 2019 doubled in size. I think it did increase a lot, but I don't know if I buy into that much, but I think that's part of it. But that didn't start, at least to my recollection. Keep in mind, I was like 8 when they were, in the early 2000s. I'm in such a weird boat where like I can go up to people and say, I've been going to UCF football games since 1999 and it's entirely accurate. But like the first 10 years of that, I really did not have the first clue what was going on. I was just like, yeah, go team in gold. But there was always the fan base has always been like that to a degree. Like I remember there was, I forget who it was, like the Fiesta Bowl year, they were getting called the Golden Knights on TV a lot and stuff like that. And it was the typical, like, how dare you? That hasn't been our name for years and whatever. So it's always been like that. But I do think that Danny White and that era and that administration, the claiming the national championship and chest thumping and Mackenzie Milton saying, go ahead and cancel the playoff. Like, do you remember? I remember this so clearly. Going into 2017, when the first college football playoff rankings came out, I did not think UCF belonged in the playoff. You did not think, the fan base did not think that. That all started when the first college football playoff rankings came out and they were 18th. And we thought they were going to be like 9. And that was where the outrage came from. Was not, I can't believe you're not considering us, but just, you mean that we're not even like, we're having our dream season and we're not even relevant? Like, and it almost feels like from that moment, that's where it's growing out into like, I think it's to an extent, it's like a drug. I remember, and this is going to show what a nut job I am with social media. But like in 2018, I remember I would go to Twitter and just go to the search function and type in UCF and just scroll and just see what was going on, because it was always like Bleacher Report, ESPN, Sports Center, Major Journalist. And like, I would do that every couple hours because there would be new UCF things and new UCF stories. And now it's like, I go do that right now, and there's not going to be a tweet that's outside of the UCF community. And I do think
the search function on Twitter is broken forever.
And there's that too, that you also can't search on Twitter anymore. It would be like, go Bulls. And I'd be like, well, that's just not what I look for. But I think it became like a drug where for 2 years, UCF was just like, without question, one of the top 25 most talked about programs, maybe even one of the top 15 for a little bit there. And you lose that, and it's like nothing hits anymore. Like, you're just like, how do we get back to being that? Like, it is not like, if I were to like lock in with UCF fans right now, like, great news for the next 5 years, UCF will go either 8-4 or 9-3 every season. I'm pretty sure most UCF fans would not take that deal. Well, even though they're probably not going to do that good, it's like they wouldn't take it, because you want the opportunity to like, no, I want to win the conference. I want to go to the playoff. I want to win games in the playoff. Like, that's where the fan base's head is at.
Yeah. I don't know. I was originally, what I was going to say in response to like earlier, I was supposed to transition us into the spring ball talk, but I didn't really do that. Yeah. It was just more of this. And we could continue talking about this exact topic probably for the next 20 minutes, but should we talk spring ball, I guess?
We should talk spring ball.
Let's do it.
It's over.
It is over. And I don't know. You yelled at me when I said we don't learn anything from spring ball. So I'm going to ask you this question at risk of being yelled at. Do you feel like we learned less this spring than ever before?
All right, let's think about springs. What did we learn? Last year we didn't learn much. There were some minor murmurs that KJ might suck, and we were like, that can't be true. Like, that's not even worth talking about. Give me a break.
Yeah.
I don't know. I actually think we learned more, to be honest with you. Because I got to watch injuries happen. So like, that was new from past spring balls, but I don't know. I think that the answer is, we learned less. And I think it's because it's a new staff. Like, there's never been a UCF team like this, right? Because even 2021, when Gus came in, the portal wasn't such a thing yet. So like, it was still largely the 2020 roster. Like, we've never seen this where UCF just resets the whole roster in off season. And there are still returning faces, but they're like, what did we determine? It's like 35 new guys. Many of whom are probably going to be contributors, 3 of whom have been added in the last couple of days here. Like, it's just like, I don't think we learned a lot, because I think the coaching staff showed up and was like, all right, what the hell do we got here? Like, it's just, there wasn't, and I think the big thing, you always talk about what you learn is always defined by what you learn at quarterback. And I will say we learned I guess it is learning how close together everyone is learning something. Because if so, then I don't think we're any closer to knowing who the starter. I think we're farther away from knowing who the starter is going to be than where we were at the start of spring.
Yeah, I could say, finding out how close they are together is learning something, but it's not learning a lot.
Right.
It's learning a thing and being like, all right, well, what do we do with that? Obviously, with Risk gone, like, that is something that was, I guess, decided this spring. So you could say you learned that and separated in that sense. But I don't know. I still came out of this spring, and I guess it could have just been based on Scott Frost's press conference on Saturday, which I just watched today. I don't know. He sounded more positive after that practice, or like after like kind of wrapping up spring, than he did in the day-to-day when they would talk to him.
Yeah.
He said like a couple times, like, he thinks they've got a solid team, he thinks. And that was the first time I'd kind of heard him say that, other than, because normally it was, we've got a long way to go. This time it was, I think we got a pretty solid team. We still got a long way to go.
But we hadn't heard from him since the start of spring. So
really?
Yeah. We'd heard it from a lot of assistant coaches, but this was his first access in a little bit. So you're right. It was a lot more positive than we'd heard from him in the past. And I don't know, I'm not taking that away as, it's just so hard to predict, because the other thing you always forget is, like, we can talk all day about what UCF does or doesn't have. Like, the teams they're going to play, that plays a role too. And like, the Big 12 is just the type of conference. We don't really know anything about any of them right now, which is really fun. But I mean, I think that it's safe to say that I personally feel a little better, not a lot better, but a little better than I did going into spring. I'm going to knock on wood. I'm no longer envisioning the 3-9 nightmare that we were talking about in January and February.
I'm glad you knocked on wood. I still wish you hadn't said that, but I also wish I didn't fully agree with that, because now I'm kind of like, no, I don't want to say that. Whatever.
You're like, maybe they win the conference
anyway, but no, not that. I was just kind of like, when I was looking at it before, I was like, yeah, I could totally see them going 3-9. Now it's more like, all right, if things don't go well, I guess it's still only a 1-win difference. Like, maybe 4-8, 5-7 is like the floor, but it's not really the floor is horrible. But I don't know. For some reason, I do come out of this. I guess maybe part of it is just kind of getting a little clearer idea of some of the talent at different positions and knowing that it's not a completely, like, from a talent standpoint, it's not a barren roster.
No.
Because going into spring, it almost felt like that just because we didn't know a lot of
Right.
these guys. And what we did know is that all the O-linemen transferred out. RJ Harvey's gone. Some talent on defense gone. Like, we've learned a little bit more about some of these guys and the way the positions are looking. So, yeah, I don't know. It's weird to kind of say, like, we still don't know who the quarterback is going to be. We don't know how much of the offense is going to look in general. But I'm still kind of like, all right, there could be something there. And I still feel better about the defense, obviously, than the offense.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
And I think what hasn't changed is me. Like, I just hope they go to a bowl game. Like, that's
the thing is that's all that. And I'm trying to imagine in my head a reality where UCF makes a bowl and the fan base is pissed about it. I think we only get there if it's one of those things. And I don't project this happening. Yeah, like they start. It's like they start like, I don't know, like 5-2 and then finish 6-6 or something. Like that could be like them people are mad. But I just don't foresee that happening with the way the schedule works. But it's kind of funny because part of what's given me a little more optimism, which is so stupid because it's just hanging on to individual press conference comments. But like you listen to the press conference, you heard Frost take a couple shots at the previous staff. I don't know if he meant them as shots, but more just him talking honestly. He talked about how, he was talking about how far they have to go and like the work they have in front of them. And he goes, this was obviously like, he was sort of reining himself in after some positive comments. And he goes, this was a 4-8 team last year. Then he pauses and like, they're probably better than 4-8, but I think we all knew that. He talked about how they're going to have to go light on them for the next month or so here because they've worked a lot harder and were worked a lot harder than any of them were used to, which is like, again, I don't think Frost meant any of this as a shot. I think he's just talking, but it's like, you never know, right? Everyone has takes and you hear stuff when Gus is the coach and you don't, I don't know, like you don't always know for 100% what's true and what's not true. And it was just kind of funny to hear most of the bad things we'd heard about the Gus administration kind of immediately get validated publicly by Frost, like him actively being like, no, the team was good. The team should not have been that bad. And oh yeah, they were not working hard at all. Like, it's just, that's given me a little hope too, is just, I don't think they're actually on paper starting from a 4-8 roster, if that makes sense. I don't think last year's team was ever what we thought it was going to be, but I do not think it was as bad as it ended up being. I think they just decided to start 4 different quarterbacks.
I hate to draw this parallel again, but like you just said, they're not starting with a 4-8 roster. When Frost got here in 2016, they weren't starting with an 0-12 roster. There was talent there. Yeah. And I think we keep getting those parallels back. But I'm glad you brought that up, though, because I think what we maybe did learn, or maybe what's made me feel a little more optimistic coming out of spring, is less about, I guess, it's some about the talent, but it's less about that and more about hearing and seeing Frost's culture building ability at work, because he's talked about, getting this team closer and kind of resetting the culture, all that. And as much as he can talk about it, it was just like players were talking about it too. Like we talked about on the podcast last week, all the O linemen saying like, we can go have a conversation with Scott Frost and we can talk to our coaches and all that. And I don't know, I think just seeing and hearing that made me feel good and happy that Frost is back and that I can feel a little bit of optimism more so than I have, I guess, in a while. So that's nice.
And the players do appear to really be enjoying this staff and the relationship building. And I mean, that was the thing about Frost, and it was why Nebraska was such a surprise in some ways, is like that was his whole thing, is he knows how to build a culture, a very specific culture. And I am curious because he's been upfront, and I do think it's UCF's belief that one of the ways you're never going to be able to stave off someone coming in and offering $2 million, but one of the ways to stave off the constant roster churn is build an environment that's so fun for players that it's hard to leave, that it's going to need to be more than this place is offering me slightly more money or something like that, and it does seem like the players are having fun. He had a quote that I thought was really interesting towards the end of the press conference where he said that he wants to have a program where we motivate through inspiration, not intimidation. And he says that's worked here before and it'll work here again. And I like that. And now what I have to caution, and I know I've said this before, is like whatever the previous coach was doing, that becomes the bad thing. And the new thing becomes the good thing. Like we had a podcast in February of 2021 where I went to the open practice, and the coaches were being way harder on the players than we'd ever seen under Frost or Heupel. And I said that was a good thing because things had gotten too lax. Like it just kind of pendulum swings. But college football has changed so much. And I do think there's a case to be made that Gus's staff didn't do themselves any favors with the way they managed some player relationships. I think it was clear at the time, as we talked about on the podcast, and it's become even more clear in the rear view, that I don't think the evaluation was ever fully fair. I think that staff was always very obsessed with who they had brought in. And I think that they would latch on to, whether it be a high school recruit or a portal player, what they believe they are. And then that's their upper hand, regardless of what really happens in practice. We heard more than a few stories about that over the years. So it's just to get back to a staff where all the players seem to think they're getting a fair shake. And yeah, they'll think that less when the depth chart comes out. That's how this goes. But, or at least they feel like they're part of a family and they feel like they trust their coaches. Maybe that welcoming, nurturing environment is more healthy in the portal era, where adversity really encourages players to hit, where at least they feel like if they feel like they can trust their coach, that's going to make a difference. You're always going to be faster to leave a situation you don't like than one where you feel like you have someone you trust right there.
Yeah, and I wonder, I kind of got that sense from what we were talking about earlier from some of his comments about NIL and just kind of the scene or the surroundings that he's in. And he said it in his introductory press conference, all that stuff. It almost feels like he's relating his own experience at UCF to the players. Because if it was hard for him to leave UCF before because of that culture, because of the way he obviously played a huge part in building all that culture, but it took, extraordinary circumstances, the familial ties and obviously his own ties to Nebraska. And it wasn't just, this team came in and offered him a bunch of money to go. And it was a tough, grueling decision for him. And that's what he's kind of talking about, making it for the players. Like, he wants it to be tough on the players to think, I know I probably have to leave, but I don't really want to. But it's make the decision harder on them. Like you said, you're going to be a lot quicker if you're just like, yeah, I'm facing some adversity here, and I don't feel like any of these coaches really care if I leave. I'm going to head out. And if you got it, like Frost keeps talking about, I want players to know that they have coaches and people here who care about them. I think a lot of these players who, when they hit adversity, it's not, I don't have anyone to turn to, let me just leave. They can probably go to their coaches because they've had that established relationship with them and maybe figure out some of these things that are forcing them or causing them to lean toward leaving. And maybe there's some more benefit to that player retention wise. And we'll see. It'll always be harder because the money isn't there. But like you said, if it's similar money and you love where you are, you can probably sacrifice a little bit to know, like, okay, I love where I am and I've got a shot here. Because it's not like UCF's in that weird in between where it feels like they're at the bottom of it, but they're not. They're more at the middle of it because they are able to take players from other teams that are below them, and they put players in the NFL, and that will help if the draft goes well this weekend. But it's not like it's still a Power 5 program in Florida. The money's not the same as it is everywhere else, but status-wise, it can be what players are looking for. Yeah,
like you wonder where UCF is in the pecking order. I assume James Madison is not thrilled they just lost their good kicker, but that's the way of the world. But two things that you brought up that I want to talk about, and I don't want to forget because you made a couple of things I want to comment on. I'm so happy you brought up the Frost talking about himself stuff, because there was a point during that answer where we're there and he's talking, and to myself, I'm like, is he talking about himself at this point? And then he kind of acknowledges. He's like, and I'm like, yeah, like that was such an interesting. There aren't a lot of coaches probably who can equate. There actually really aren't any, because NIL is not like, it'll be weird in 20 years, like when coaches are players who went through this, because then they can offer their insights and decisions they made. But right now, this is all new. It was not an option. Like Mackenzie Milton can't talk. What's Mackenzie Milton going to say? Is he going to be like, yeah, I totally would have gone to Nebraska in 2018 if these rules had been the way then? Which, like, guys, spoiler, he would have. But it was really interesting, and that's an experience that I don't know. I wonder if Frost can draw on, because I also think there's something to be said of, I don't know if you want to sit a player down and go, listen, failed at my last job, like, bad times. But it is interesting that he can comment on, it's not, you think because something's new, it's better, but it's often not. The other thing you said,
I think that's why he kind of keeps bringing it up, is it has shaped who he is at this point.
What he went through in Nebraska is insane. And it goes far beyond, many coaches fail. I promise you, Gus Malzahn did not come away from failing at UCF with the personality and difference in life change that Frost did in Nebraska. Because I think to go home, to go to a place where you are I mean, the only comparison is if Mackenzie Milton is named head coach at UCF one day and dramatically fails. That's the only comparison. And it is, I think it's a horrible thing to go through. And I think it did change him. And he's seemed different since he's been at UCF. And I think that's a good thing. But the other point you touched on that I want to make is you talked about how, the differences in a little money or whatever. There is a misconception among UCF fans and among college football fans that the way this works is the player looks at his offers and goes, this school offered me $90,000. That one offered me $100,000. I'm going to the $100,000. The truth of it is that it seems like not all the time, but a lot of the time, players are not just taking the highest bag or whatever you want to call it in front of them. Mm-hmm. There's the crazy ones, right? Like a Lee Hunter type one where some school just offers offer you can't refuse. That happens. But there's situations where I remember it was 247. They did this, and The Athletic, they both did it actually. They did anonymous interviews with recruits. This was in last year's cycle about, did you take the highest monetary offer you had in front of you? None of them did. Not a single recruit they talked to took the highest offer. Some of them talked about how it was a turnoff, that there were certain schools that they didn't even have a relationship with, and they just keep throwing higher and higher dollar amounts. Now, none of them went to school for nothing, and none of them took their smallest offers, but they didn't always take the highest offer. You see that Josh Hoover, TCU's quarterback, this week, it was reported that Tennessee came in to try to get him to replace Nico Iamaleava and offered him more than $1 million on top of what his current deal is. Now, TCU threw in a sweetener. He got a little more money, but it still wasn't anything close to what Tennessee was going to offer. He did not go. He's staying at TCU. He has a good situation. So I do think there's something to that where UCF can have really good players and keep those really good players without being the richest team. It just has to be a team they don't want. That's how they did it in the old days. They just have to be a team the players don't want to, don't give them reasons to want to leave.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty public by now, right? That teams came in for RJ Harvey.
Oh, yeah, that's out there.
And it's like it's happened. They've done it successfully in the past, even not having – I'm not going to say the culture was horrible because I can't say that, but they've retained players in the past. They've had the NIL to retain players. And they did it heading into 23.
Offered Harvey an in-state school offered Harvey a stupid amount of money to head out, and he didn't. Yeah, maybe he should have, with how things went, but he didn't. And that is the reality. Is for it's you don't, and this is why, because it's all hidden in secret. It feels like it's terrible because you only hear about the guys who take the offer. Yeah. You don't hear about the guys who don't. So it's like you don't realize there is that loyalty. It does exist. Not every player is leaping as soon as. It's a headache, like Frost said, because it is always a negotiation. Because even if you are one of those players, and again, this is where I don't blame the players, even if it say that I, for some reason, have very different genes than I actually do, and I am a successful quarterback for UCF right now. And I love UCF. I love playing for Coach Frost. It's great. I love all the uniform combinations. And one day I get a call from Georgia and they go, hey, I know UCF's going to pay you $800,000 this year. We'll pay you $1.4 million to come here. We'll almost double your salary. Why don't you come in here? And I don't want to go to Georgia, but I'm not going to go to UCF and say, hey, they offer me this money. Screw them. I'm sticking with you guys. I'm going to go, 1.4 million is a lot of money. I mean, is 800 the highest you can go, or can we get a little more in here? And then UCF will go, oh God, please don't. That's,
You being you would say, listen, I'm fine sticking at 800,000. Just let me pick the uniform combos and we're good. We'll call it even there.
I'll give money back.
They'd be like, all right, sicko. Yeah. All right. What if we give you the uniform powers and we lower your salary by half?
Deal.
400,000.
But that is what happens, and that's why it's a headache for Frost. Because when the offers come in, UCF still just have to probably then sweeten up the deal a little bit. But it's still better than the alternative where everyone just heads out. So keep that in mind too. UCF does not need to. They need more money than they have, but they do not need to be the richest to field a very good team. Iowa State. I am rambling like a monster on this podcast. This has been so bad. I keep finishing thoughts, then just heading to the next one because
we went away from the final spring ball thoughts back to kind of the NIL where UCF is.
This podcast is exactly what I thought it was going to be. Iowa State just played for the Big 12 title. They did not win it, but they played there. They beat Miami in whatever the hell bowl game that was. That wasn't the bowl, was it?
I don't remember.
It was one of the Camping World Stadium bowls. Won 11 games, top 15 season. Athletic reported that they had the lowest NIL budget in the Big 12. So it's doable. It's maybe not consistently doable. Like if your goal is I want UCF to win 10 games every year, that's probably not happening with the money they have, but you absolutely can build good teams and build them with some level of regularity.
It's not even happening anyway. Like even teams that are spending a lot of money aren't winning 10 every year. That's hard to do.
I know the new Big 12 is so new, but I just don't foresee anyone being like that. It's just too weird of a conference. Everyone's too close together.
Yeah. Anything else before we get into our finishing segments. That was a bad time for a freeze. Anything else?
Yeah, that was a bad time for a freeze, but we're good. I thought you were just giving me a lot of time to decide if I was done. But go ahead.
No, we'll jump into the football news real quick. Linebacker DJ McCormick entered the transfer portal last week. Actually, today was announced that he's going to USF. Former UCF quarterback EJ Colson has also entered the transfer portal only months after getting to Purdue.
I don't know. This is what we just talked about for an hour. Is what do you mean that he left UCF to go to Purdue, and then what? How long was he there? 2 months?
Probably 4, right? He probably would committed in December.
Did he commit right after? Okay, well I hope.
I mean, he entered the transfer portal like the night of the Utah game, so I think it was like pretty shortly after that.
All I care about is him going to either Army or Wake Forest or Vanderbilt. Like that's all I want at this point in time.
Just another black and gold school. UCF added a couple transfers: Michigan defensive end Emmerich Kumba and James Madison kicker Noe Rulis, which I was happy to see that. Also,
did you look up those pronunciations?
I only looked up the kicker, and thanks to the Myrtle Beach Bowl 2022 media guide for that. That's where I got the pronunciation there.
I had no idea how that name was pronounced, so I was impressed when you said it like that because I really didn't know.
It's not what I thought it would have been, but I wanted to look it up really badly. I think Emmerich Kumba is right. I just didn't look it up. But yeah, no, I'm happy they got a kicker because we talked about it on the podcast last week. Grant Reddick was scaring everyone.
So really quickly, I just want to add some to the news. Debo Coleman has entered the portal.
Okay.
Doesn't have eligibility, but
he might.
But he might, because now there's a lawsuit, because of course there is. But
yeah.
I like we talked about in our last podcast, Reddick, which of course had been out there that he was not doing well. And I don't know, you can hear he's not doing well, and then you go to the open practice and watch it, and I'm like, this is a problem. And a kicker, as you know, if you experience Daniel Lebarski, having a kicker who can't kick, it can just straight up kill the season. And Rulis, is that how you say his last name?
Yeah.
He's not necessarily he's not like a lights out, I hope we're paying him $6 million addition, but he's reliable, really, really reliable kicker, especially from 39 and less, which that's fine. That's it's just hitting the reliable kicks is all I'm looking for. I don't need the kicker who hammers it in from 55. Just don't have it where you're at the 24 and you're like, they're going to have to go for it on 4th and 7 because he's not going to be able to hit it. That's what you want to avoid.
Yeah. One more piece of news that.
Do you remember when? I'm so sorry. Sometimes I think about how Daniel Lebarski had one of the worst seasons we've ever seen in 2020. The type of season so bad, one of his teammates tried to fight him on the sideline of a game. Then he comes back for 2021 and again has a very bad season. And then in the bowl game, Gus Malzahn goes, "I want you to kick a 51-yarder." That was crazy. We should have known it right then.
I wish I had it read. Oh, I tweeted something at the time. I said, what in the world has Gus seen from Daniel Lebarski at any point to feel like he can send him out there for a 55-yard field goal?
And remember, they cut to Gus on the sideline. You can see him mouthing. He's going, "That's my bad," patting his chest. It's why did you do that?
Oh, what a man. Last piece of news here. Cincinnati wide receiver Tony Johnson is visiting UCF on Tuesday, it was reported. He's from Ocala. This would be his third stop, but I told you it's a rare third school guy who actually has produced at the previous 2 schools. He was over 2 years at FAU. He had 60 catches for 669 yards and 7 touchdowns. And then last year at Cincinnati was a starter. He had 48 catches, 449 yards, and 6 touchdowns. Given the state of wide receivers, I said in the spring I feel better than I did going into the spring. Still, bring him in. I'm not turning down any wide receivers with 13 career touchdowns at this point.
They've also now suffered multiple serious injuries at wide receiver, which was already a position of question.
Yeah.
So
yeah, that's fair too. Little bit of mock draft roundup. Actually, the last one for this year because the draft is Thursday through Saturday this week.
This is me learning the draft is this week, but go ahead.
I'm about to be very busy.
So I'm not going to be able to talk to you for 4 days. Damn.
You're going to text me. I'm going to respond 4 hours later and be like, "Oh, cool." And just acknowledge it, but not retain anything
you missed a step. I'm going to text you, spend 2 hours getting offended you have not replied, and then you'll reply 4 hours later.
Yeah. Okay, so yeah, RJ Harvey, same as last week, still projected as a 4th rounder. He actually moved up 3 spots on the consensus board. He's 108th overall. Still finding him in that 3rd to 5th round range. BJ Adams still looking like an undrafted free agent. The 7th round, especially, I'd say even day 3, but especially the 6th and 7th round is kind of a crapshoot. If a team really likes him or liked him during the pre-draft process, maybe we'll get lucky and see him get drafted. But he's fallen to 328th overall on the consensus board, which I find weird. It just depends because it wasn't even me. I didn't even do this. So it wasn't a UCF bias, but our own cornerback projections or rankings over at Pewter Report, I think he was like 16th on the list, which would put him probably like the 5th round range. So it just depends on who you are. Mac McWilliams projected in the 7th round. He's 224th overall. And then Kobe Hudson still projected as a 7th rounder. I've seen him as high as 4th round in some mock drafts, which would blow my mind, but hopefully he gets drafted regardless.
I just got to say, while you were doing that, there was a fly on my screen, and I attempted to swat the fly with my mouse before realizing that was not going to work. So that's where I'm at mentally as a person. But anyway, this is what I love about the NFL draft. I took the mouse and tried to like get it to go. Bailey, it just came back and I almost did it again. Like hand went for the mouse.
Get your hand off the mouse.
Okay. Now, what I love about the way this NFL draft is shaping up, according to your expert analysis, is that what's going to happen is like in the last hour of the draft, UCF will have had one player drafted. And then we'll have to find out if they're going to have one player or 4 players drafted, which is like a wild spectrum of outcomes. And that's going to be very fun.
Yeah. But at least, I don't know, I'm seeing RJ like 3rd round, 4th round.
I'm so excited. I've gaslit myself into like, I think he's going to be very good in the NFL. Like I've decided he's going to be like a breakout freshman, and I'm ready to take him very early in fantasy and have him be confused.
It depends on who drafts him, because I won't just do this for any team, but he's like the first UCF player I think I'm considering buying their NFL jersey.
Really? Even if he goes to the Falcons or the Saints?
That's what I said. It depends on who it is. I will not buy a Saints or a Falcons jersey.
Is there any – I'm very checked out from the NFL, as anyone who's listened known. Is there any sense of like a grouping of teams who are likely, or is it really just whoever?
If you give me a second, I can look at like where he's going in mocks, but like I don't think there's really a sense. I told you the other day. I was listening to, it was actually crazy. Trevor Segama from PFF and his co-host was the NFL Stock Exchange podcast. They did a 5-hour, 55-minute full 7-round mock stream, which I'm still working my way through. RJ went, I think it was 88th overall to the Jaguars. So a lot of UCF Jags fans would be happy. I think it would kind of annoy me a little bit, but I don't know. I'm looking at like, if I'll just list off some teams that he's going to in some of the latest mock drafts, like
Bears,
Patriots, Cowboys, Dolphins. It was a Dolphins blog that did that. So I don't know if you want to. I don't know. Maybe that's Colts, Raiders. Raiders was round 3. Another Jaguars one, the Rams, the Giants. So, yeah, it's kind of all over the place. The Chiefs, which would probably be good for him personally. I don't want to see him on the Chiefs.
Oh, I'd love to see him on the Chiefs. I'm like, this is part of my not watching the NFL is like the Super Bowl came around and like, I think the Chiefs are cool. Like, I just like watching them play. And everyone else is like, they're the devil and must be put down. And I'm like, this is fun. It's good football.
But then it wasn't good football. They played like
They played pretty bad this year. I don't know. I feel like I'm the opposite of most sports fans because I just like greatness. Like I'm always like, who's the next?
Oh yeah, that's been a thing.
Something crazy.
That's been a thing since our friendship started because you never like hated Alabama and.
No, it was getting a little nasty with our little group chat with you, me, and our friend Sarah around Super Bowl time because you guys were very, very angry about the Chiefs and their success. And I was just like, that'd be so cool to see a team win 3 in a row. Like that would be like such an accomplishment.
I was just bored of it, which I don't know.
Well, this is the cycle. Everyone thought the Warriors were really cool, and then it was like, we got to get them out of here. People like the Patriots back in the day, and everyone hates.
You know what's funny about the Warriors to me is people were like, we got to get them out of here, and then they kind of were in the background for a couple of years, at least from my viewpoint, and then like it's gotten back to the point where it's like people are just like, I love watching the Warriors play. Like I don't want stuff to ever
because they stopped winning championships, and then everyone was like, actually, no, it's really cool.
Like wait, now I kind of want them to. I don't want them to win a championship again.
But what is that like psychological thing where it's like a team is really cool until they win, then it's like actually I hate them. Like I don't
tired
know.
of it.
I guess. But did people get tired of like in the 90s? Was everyone like, I'm so sick of this Michael Jordan guy? Like he's got to stop. Like I don't
know. I wasn't alive yet, so.
Well, I wasn't asking you like tell me the answer. I was more just like leaving the thought out there. But yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I actually.
You also were alive for like multiple of his championships, for the record.
Yeah, but I wasn't aware.
Okay. Apparently, you weren't locked in as a 2-year-old. Interesting.
I wasn't, especially not to basketball. Game of the week. UCF baseball actually had a series win this past weekend. They beat number 15 TCU 2 out of 3. I realized as I was doing this, things are looking they're more dire than I even thought, which is bad.
They're not going to make the tournament, buddy.
Hey, right now they are, buddy. That's why this weekend is so important. They are 22-17 overall, 6-12 in the Big 12. They're tied for 12th. Tied for 12th in the conference right now, which 12 teams make the conference tournament. They have the tiebreaker over BYU because they won 2 out of 3. As of right now, they'd make the tournament. They probably will not be after this weekend because I looked at the schedule and said, oh, who do they play? Number 14, West Virginia. I know they just took 2 out of 3 for number 15, but West Virginia is coming in at 34-4, 13-2 in the Big 12. They lead the Big 12 right now. Games are on Friday at 6, Saturday at 6, Sunday at 1. So this is a very important series. They can't get swept. Winning 2 out of 3 would be monumental. But obviously, getting swept would be very damaging to their Big 12 tournament hopes. Which
I want to do that. That like that like Anakin and Padme meme where it's like the Anakin says a thing and she's like right. Like I want that, and it's like me time traveling to the start of the season. I'm like UCF baseball is going to miss the tournament. And they're like, oh, the NCAA tournament, right? It's like the NCAA tournament, right?
The Big 12 tournament. We'll see.
Tough,
yeah. Tweet of the week.
Tweet of the week. Tweet of the week this week goes to, kind of fumbled saying that, but we're fine. Tweet of the week this week goes to ESPN. They had a lovely article on the future of the college football playoff because all of the commissioners and important folks of the sport are meeting this week. And you're probably thinking, if you're not clued into what's going on, you might thinking, oh boy, Christian, are they meeting to solve the transfer portal or NIL? No, they're meeting to yell at each other about the playoff again and still come up with nothing. Both the Athletics and ESPN articles said they're probably not going to come up with anything in this, but they're going to fight about it some more. But we did have one new concept because, guys, keep in mind again that Chris Vanini was the one who pointed out that we are most likely at this point in time going to have 4 different playoff formats in 4 years. 23, 24, 25, and 26 will all end up being a different format because of the way things are going right now. So that's pretty cool. But the ESPN article brought a new thing into the equation, and I'm just going to read it. They're talking about different playoff formats that are being considered. One possibility, which could be viewed as a compromise, is having conferences earn automatic bids through their play each season, a model in which each Power 4 league can earn guaranteed spots through a combination of its team's overall records and maybe even TV ratings, according to a source. So I just want you, listener, whoever you are, whether you are one of the diehards of the sport or whether you just like the sound of our voices and don't even follow college athletics, to understand that there is someone high up in college athletics, perhaps multiple people, think that it makes sense to say we should actually, on paper, algorithm decide who makes the playoff based on how many people watch their games. And I really just want to say for a second, while that's a funny concept, I actually seriously, all jokes aside, think that that is the most unhinged concept related to college athletics I have ever heard in my life. And that should say a lot, because it is not exactly like a rational thing, this industry that we're in. And what I love more than that is it's not like it's just random surprise who goes on TV. Like ESPN and Fox decide where the teams play. Like you could literally have ESPN just be like, we think Florida State should make it, so we're moving their game from ESPN2 to ABC. I mean, it won't happen. I promise you that. But just the fact that that's even being discussed in the room is, like, jokes aside, one of the most disgusting things I've ever heard. Just absolutely shameful, and really just makes you question why we even care about this, because it's just so mind-numbingly stupid.
I was going to say, it won't happen, but sport's dead.
The fact that that's being discussed is enough to be like, this is just those are what the people who run the sport think. They think that's what makes sense. It's really unfortunate. I do think it's all going to crumble and end in our lifetimes, because it's just run by people who are absolute idiots, and they just make idiotic choices every time they're given a chance.
Yeah, it's kind of sad to think about.
Yeah,
see the end of college football at some point.
Well, UCF will always be playing football somewhere. This version of it, where it's this group of teams, it's not going to last, because, and what's extra funny is what the Athletic pointed out too, is it's like everyone talks about, oh, the SEC, this is all the Big Ten. Like the Big Ten are the ones who push all of this. The article literally said that, because the big debate is whether they're going to go to automatic bids or not, which, like, wink, wink, would probably benefit UCF, to be honest, because the Big 12 would get 2 of them. It's still not good for the sport. And the Athletics article was straight up like, Greg Sankey doesn't care. Like, he knows the SEC doesn't need them. He'll just go along with whatever the Big 10 does. And the Big 10 is like, we want it in writing that we get double the teams of the ACC and Big 12. Why? And why do you think the Big 10 would want that, not the SEC?
because they're not always guaranteed it.
Yes, they're the ones who actually wouldn't earn that in a lot of seasons. Like the Big Ten has brands that the Big 12 and ACC, I acknowledge, cannot come close to competing with. Michigan, Penn State, Ohio State, USC, Oregon. There's nothing like that in the Big 12. But then for those, you've got your Illinois, your Northwesterns, your Rutgers, your Marylands, your Purdues, all these teams that just kind of suck. And it's frustrating that they have so much money and so much power that there's no check. They're allowed to do whatever they want. So, and they're going to ruin everything. So it's very fun.
What another uplifting end to the podcast. We're really getting into a routine of doing this every time we talk. My love for the game is reinvigorated, or I'm reinvigorated by my love of the game, whatever that Moneyball quote is that I sent you last week.
I was about to say, you literally did just send me that. I think it was about this topic,
it was
not this
because
one.
We left the podcast last week, or after the podcast, we talked about the Chom Cincinnati thing, and we were both just like, this is the disaster. And then I just, as I hung up, I realized I was like, oh, that'd be a good quote to use. So, yeah. All right. Well, let's get out of here before we say anything else that's going to damage our love for anything. We'll be back next week with episode 266. Until then, you can find us on Twitter at BaileyJAdams22, at @ByCASimmons, at Night Sports Now, and at Pegasus Podcast. Thank you guys so much for being with us. We will talk to you soon.
Bye, everybody.